Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we'll be talking about the film Superman. Spoilers ahead. Fun fact, in the comics, Ultraman is an evil alternate universe counterpart of Superman and the leader of the evil alternate Justice League named the Crime Syndicate. This film came out in 2025 and stars David Corenswet, Rachel Brosnahan, and Nicholas Hoult, and was directed by James Gunn. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. Superman tells the story of Clark Kent, who was trying to live up to what his birth parents wanted for him to help the humans of Earth, which he learns from a message that is damaged. Lex Luthor complicates things by showing the full message after fixing it and casting doubt on Superman. Superman must learn how his alien heritage and human upbringing coexist and how to show people he is there to help and spread hope. Superman is an action-adventure superhero film. It has similar vibes to Blue Beetle, My Adventures with Superman, or Spider-Man. When I heard James Gunn was going to be one of the CEOs of DC, I was so excited. And then they announced that he would direct the first film in, their new universe. I was even more excited for that. James excels with these superhero projects by making the viewer feel a connection to the characters while also still enjoying the action. He also excites me because he uses characters that aren't frequently used in films or TV or talked about in general but are in the comics. In this film, we obviously get Superman, who is some random character, but then he throws in the Justice Gang, which includes the Green Lantern Guy Gardner, Mr. Terrific, Michael Holt, and Hawkgirl Kendra Saunders, and then you have people like the Engineer, Ultraman, Rick Flag, Supergirl, and Maxwell Lord. Some of these characters might be familiar to some, but many don't get their chance to truly shine, and I think that's where James Gunn excels, giving these characters a chance to shine a little bit and let people fall in love with them. The beginning of this film gives us like 3 sentences to set the stage. I like that the film did this considering they don't do a whole prologue on Krypton exploding and instead throws you right into the story with some useful knowledge. David Corenswet plays Clark Kent, aka Superman. Physically, he has the look, and when he was acting, he was able to show why Superman is so loved worldwide. I love to see his passion for doing what he felt was the right thing and trying to help everyone that he could, as long as their intentions were good. The lack of cursing and the corniness of some of his statements really made it feel like he was actually from a small town in Kansas. I love how the film also showed that even with all his feats, he cannot be everywhere at once and sometimes needs help. When he calls on other heroes to help or when Lois is talking to them, they seem more like his friends than his coworkers, which I thought was cool to show because at the end of the day, they are all trying to achieve the same goal and they would cross paths, trying to save people. Superman is known for being nearly invincible, and I love that the film showed from the beginning that while he may not die from some of these things, it doesn't mean he can't get really hurt. In the beginning, he's fighting the hero of Baravia, and he is almost taken out, which we later learn is because it's a clone of him in an enhanced suit. Then the engineer almost suffocates him, which was great to show another way he could die. And then obviously we see the most notable way to kill Superman, kryptonite. I think it's great to show how he is nearly invincible, keyword nearly, but also that he feels pain, so he may need time to recover. They even show what the recovery looks like in his fortress, where he has some cool robots that help him to get better by focusing the sun on him to ensure he can heal quickly. I love seeing him heal and how that too can be painful, but in the end, he comes out ready to head into battle again. They nailed Superman's parents living in a rural area and how different that is compared to the city. Life is just much slower than the city, and they show that his parents live a life that is more relaxed and not just go, go, go like the city, and treasure their time, but also it seems like they are a bit old-fashioned. It's evident when Clark calls them and his mom puts him on speakerphone and is yelling into the phone. And then when we go to the house, his room looks like a time capsule, but also they just seem as low-tech as possible. I felt this was a more realistic interpretation of his parents and growing up in the rural areas versus the city. Even though Clark listened to his birth parents' message over and over, the Kents were his parents who raised him and made him who he was. I love how his dad reminded him that he is not destined to be his parent and that children should chart their own path, which made Clark realize he was beating himself up too much about something he could not control, but also that his adoptive parents taught him how to value life and how to be a good human, so he didn't need to worry about whatever people thought he would do because of his birth parents' message, because he was not a conqueror, but instead a helper. I love how he started the movie healing while listening to his birth parents, and by the end, he switched to his adoptive parents. I love Lex Luthor being very smart, but not physically strong, and obsessed with Superman. It really helps lean into this brute versus brains. By the time of this film, we know he has examined Superman's fighting, knows the general location of his fortress, runs a company, has created a stable pocket universe, and has created a clone of Superman. They do a good job of showing how selfish he is by his willingness to risk lives just to get land, which honestly isn't very surprising for a billionaire because I like to think that you don't make that much money by being morally sound. His battle with Superman is very much brute versus brains, and while Superman can be scary with his strength, Lex knows that he cares more about being a hero, so he won't actually hurt him, or it would prove that Lex has been right about him being the enemy. I thought that this was a great portrayal of Lex to show how smart, influential, and crazy he is. Lex has two super people he uses a lot, the Engineer and Ultraman. The Engineer has nanobots infused with her, which she uses to create some cool weapons, and I loved her fighting style. She's part of the Authority, which is also a superhero team that will also get a film, so I'm excited to see her come back, and I can tell she will make the jump to being a hero. Then you have Ultraman, who in the moment I forgot is the name of the evil alternate Superman, so his reveal was a huge shock to me when he looks exactly like Superman. He doesn't say anything but listens to Lex's command and almost took out Superman till Superman outsmarted him and sent him into a black hole. He is the reason why Lex could get into the Fortress of Solitude because he has Superman's DNA. At first, I was like, maybe he will create the crime syndicate in another universe that he gets to via the black hole he ends up in at the end of the movie. But what I think might actually happen, which would be exciting to see, is him somehow becoming Bizarro. Also, it must be pointed out that there is a small cameo by Michael Rosenbaum as one of Lex's Raptor guards. The name may sound familiar because he was Lex Luthor in the ever so popular TV show Smallville. Rachel Brosnahan plays Lois Lane, and this might be one of the best portrayals I have seen of the character. They nailed how even though she has no powers, she will run into harm's way for either a story or to figure out how to help Clark. I feel like in the past movies they showed her working at the Daily Planet to show she was a reporter, but every other scene showed her as just Clark's love interest and didn't balance the two well. I think in this film they balance it way better, showing how she and Clark are heading for the same goal, but he's doing it as Superman and she's doing it as a reporter, Lois Lane, and really brings down Lex. Rachel was perfectly cast for this role because she was able to bring the intensity that Lois brings out in her reporting in order to get answers and work with people like Jimmy Olsen to get the answers they need, even if it's through unconventional methods. You could really tell she had a love for reporting, how she wanted to help, and why she is one of the best reporters. Skylar Gisondo plays Jimmy Olsen, and every scene with him was funny because he was trying so hard to help Lois, but that meant communicating with an ex and agreeing to stuff he really didn't want to do. I love how he helped Lois with her story, even though she didn't have much, and even though he got what he believed was crap, Lois put together a puzzle and proved that it wasn't crap and was actually very useful. It was funny to also see Eve go completely crazy over Jimmy and how she was so scared to break it off with Lex because of his prison in the Pocket Universe, but she really did not like that man. I do wonder what will happen with them since she surely didn't forget everything that Jimmy promised her. Anthony Carrigan portrays a character I never really expected we would get in live action, Metamorpho. He can transmute elements in his body, and originally Lex is using him so that he can make kryptonite to weaken Superman, and he is only doing it because Lex is holding his son hostage. When Lex kills an innocent in front of him, he feels an immense amount of guilt and decides to help Superman, and this scene shows how powerful he is and how powerful he could be, and also how smart he is. His powers would be useless if he knew nothing or the bare minimum about elements, but he actually knows a lot. And we get to see that when he replicates what a son would be like to get Superman back on his feet so that he can save his son. It was cool to not only see him on screen, but also to see how his powers are very useful in a variety of situations. And in the end, he found some friends who will help him use them for good. The Justice Gang, who are filled with familiar heroes, had a great intro, but at this stage are in the superhero game partly to help, but also partly to get paid, since they are bankrolled by Maxwell Lord, who is portrayed by Sean Gunn. There is Guy Gardner, who came up with the awful name and is a Green Lantern, portrayed by Nathan Fillion. I actually knew who Guy was and wasn't that excited because I think that he is one of the most annoying characters and is so full of himself. And after the movie, he's still not one of my favorite characters, but the film did a good job of making him annoying, but making it more comical and gave him some redeeming qualities. Then you have Kendra Saunders, played by Isabella Merced, who is the current reincarnation of Hawkgirl, who loves a fight, but also seems to think that the team is kind of dumb. I love seeing her in battle, and she was so badass, and when she did her hawk screech, I was losing my mind because it was just so cool. I love how the dictator said she wouldn't drop him, and she did, which seems very on brand for Hawkgirl. Like, she is a hero, don't get me wrong, but do not tempt her with a good time. Then you have Mr. Terrific, played by Eddie Gathegi, who is super smart and has the T-Spears that can do plenty of things, but also he is a skilled fighter if he really needs to get his hands dirty. I love how Mr. Terrific's knowledge rivals Lex Luthor's and how he is willing to help Lois when no one else wants to, and he is very confident in his calculations. Mr. Terrific is like one of those heroes, too, that you would not think could hold his own in a fight, but in this film, they show that with his mind, he can most definitely take out some big hitters if he truly puts that mind to work. He has this calmness to him that really makes you feel like he has control of the situation, but if he starts freaking out a little bit, like he did in the end of the movie when the world, was splitting, you realize that something is up and he does not have control of it. The gang works together and gets the job done, but outside of that, there seems to be little else they have in common. They are staying in the Hall of Justice, which is being built, so I'm interested in the future of the Justice Gang, or like whether the Justice League or Justice Society will come in. Crypto was such a fun addition to the movie, and I love how they treat him as a superpowered dog, not as a dog that has the intelligence of a human. He doesn't understand when not to jump on an injured Clark, when not to fetch the T-Spears because they aren't toys, or make the Fortress of Solitude a mess, but he does know how to throw people across the room when needed. It was funny to see Clark interact with him and try to keep him calm, but of course, he has so much energy just like any other dog. One great plot twist was finding out that he wasn't actually Superman's dog, but he is Supergirl's dog, and Millie Alcock makes a cameo at the end to come pick him up, and he pounces on her due to excitement. One thing I love is how they have multiple big companies in this film. There are so many big billionaires in the DC universe, and so it's nice to see that they didn't condense them down to one, but instead they show how Maxwell Lord low-key seems to hate Lex Luthor, and they mention another billionaire named Stag when we're at Stag Industries, who in the comics is the reason Metamorpho is like that. I'm glad they mentioned these, which may not be important now, but will be later, and to also show that this isn't a universe where there is just one big company. There are many big billionaires up to no good. You also see a sign that points to Gotham City, which has another billionaire by the name of Batman. Or Bruce Wayne is the billionaire, not really Batman. But I'm just glad that we get so many of these that are brought up in this movie. The movie has political undertones, but so does nearly every other comic book, and it is really up to the viewer to make the connections. Superman is not only an immigrant, but he is a refugee. And in this film, one of the underlying stories is that he is trying to stop the forceful removal of the Jarhan Purian people by the Barabians. I saw people rightfully comparing it to the genocide happening in Palestine, but it's not exclusive to that. You can see similarities between what the film was showing and most genocides that were forcing people to move off their land, killing and abusing natives for no other reason than someone else wanting that land. This can be seen with the Holocaust, the genocide that happened in the Americas with the indigenous people, the Assyrian genocide, or the Rohingya genocide, to name a few. When the writers write these comic books and the directors make these films, there is a lot of influence from the real world. If you are shocked that the film showed Superman as an immigrant, an illegal immigrant at that, and a refugee, and how people look down on him because of that, then that's on you for failing to do your research and limited understanding of history. It shouldn't be a surprise that Superman would be an immigrant and refugee because the men who created Superman, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, were born into families that were refugees and immigrated to the U.S. Movies like this aren't necessarily mimicking current events, but sometimes the storyline just fits because history seems to be cyclical. And unfortunately, sometimes art imitates life. So basically what I'm saying is that all the people that say things are too woke, which typically seems to have racist, sexist, homophobic, or ableist undertones, need to do more research on some things because you sound very uneducated talking about films like this where they are reiterating things that are bad, like genocides, nativists or anti-immigration, xenophobia, apartheid, and sometimes billionaires. If you have more in common with the villains in movies like this, then you need to do some unpacking and realize that you may be on the wrong side of history and need to take some pointers from Superman, Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, or anyone opposing Lex or Vasile. One thing I think Superman tries to reassure you on is that you have more in common with the people standing next to you on the street than the billionaire who has no interest in seeing you succeed or the politician who just wants to use and abuse their power and not make much change. So maybe start doing some independent research like Lois, and you may uncover the truth and can help put a wedge in these people's plots. Superman will always be political, along with so many other heroes, and this film is just showing his life and how that ties in to some of the things that people might see as political, but it's really just highlighting things that go on in life. My favorite part of the movie was the conversation between Lois and Clark, where she interviews him. Clark had been interviewing himself as Superman, and Lois challenges him and says, let her interview him, which he does, and it doesn't go well for him. It was a great scene to show that journalism isn't always about making the interviewee feel comfortable, but sometimes you really need to ask the questions in a way to catch your interviewee off guard and then get them to answer questions more truthfully. For Clark, he gets frustrated because he knows what he is doing is right, but doesn't want to get caught in the bureaucracy of it all. The scene is tense and ends with him leaving, but it shows how complicated superhero life is. They truly want to help, and they do, but sometimes people value process over lives, which Clark is understandably irritated about. Lois approaches this not trying to attack him, in my opinion, but asking questions that other people would ask, but also kind of foreshadowing how later in the movie people would be scared of him after his parents' message gets leaked because he just seems like unchecked power. You can always say so many things about yourself, but there are things that others may see that might be different from what you may be saying about yourself. And Lois is asking these questions that others are asking and really seeing how he would answer them because at the end of the day, the world doesn't know much about Superman. It was great to see this scene and seeing the actors spar with each other, and it really had me on the edge of my seat. And I think it also further proved that Lois Lane is a good reporter because she's not scared to ask these difficult questions and really dig deep to know what the answers are and to give people information that they should be having. Superman is a great superhero movie filled with a great cast and a very interesting story. While Superman isn't one of my favorite heroes, I'm glad to see this take on the story and to also be reintroduced to some characters that haven't had much time to shine in the past projects. This made me excited for the DC universe and what is cooking with their next projects. Thank you for watching my video. I would love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. If you have not subscribed, please do so you can keep up to date with more of my videos. But besides that, everyone stay safe, have fun, and goodbye.